We'll do a review in Likutei Sichos in Chelek Yutes, volume 19. This is the Sicha for Shabbos Nachamu. And this is also a siyum for Maseches Makis that the Rebbe said during Chafov and the Shabbosim and other Shabbosim. Now, this Sicha, the Rebbe explains basically the whole end of the Gemara in Masechta Makis about the story in which Rabbi Akiva and the other sages, and they were crying when they saw the joy from Romi and the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, and Rabbi Akiva comforted them until they said, Nichamtonu, Nichamtonu, a double lashon. And the Rebbe asks here in the beginning, because the Haftorah begins with the lashon Nachamu, Nachamu. What is the double lashon? The Rebbe explains the idea that there's one thing, a level of the destruction, and then there is another level of the Chilul Hashem, the desecration of Hashem's name, which is in addition to the actual destruction itself. That's how the Rebbe explains the difference of the views of the Rabbi Akiva and the other sages who saw things a different perspective. The Rebbe is going to bring out in the Halacha. And the double Nachamu is also to see the comfort within the further degradation of besides the Golus, also the Chilul Hashem, how the comfort would come also from all the levels, as the Rebbe will explain. It's a very long, detailed Sikha, and we get ready. We'll do the best we can. We'll go step by step. Shabbos Nachamu and the siyum of Maseches Makis Aleph. So first, the Rebbe brings the Haftorah of Shabbos Nachamu. If them kefil loshen hakosuf, for on the duplicate language of the posuk that it says Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami yomer elekechem. So it says two times Nachamu, comfort, be comforted, my people, my nation, says God. Zog der Medrash, the Medrash says, Loku bikiflaim, they had been smitten double, umisnachmim bikiflaim, and they're also being comforted in double. As der inyan hanichum vedzayin kofel, which means that the idea of the comforting will be a double comforting. So that men verstehen, so we need to understand what is the main v'toichen from Nachamu kiflayim. What is the meaning? What is the content? What is the idea of a double comfort in Nachamu kiflayim? On the other hand, if it was smitten twice, they need to be comforted twice. Uli iduch is yidu the kashya bepashtus. It's known the question very simply. What is the chidush as misnachmin b'kiflayim? What is the novelty? The posuk says Nachamu, Nachamu. The Medrash says that they're going to be comforted twice. So what's the novelty about it? What's the chidush? The baldas the loku is given b'kiflayim. Since the smitten was double, so it only is appropriate the comfort to be double too. So the Rebbe brings in the whole siyum of Masechta Makis. The Rebbe is going to quote the whole Gemara. We'll understand this by first introducing the explanation in the end of the tractate Makis. There too we find this duplicate language of Nachamu. Over there, when the sages after Rabbi Akiva comforted them, they answered him, they said, Akiva nichamtonu, Akiva nichamtonu. Akiva, you have comforted us. Akiva, you have comforted us. There too, the discussion is about the idea of the destruction and exile. Over there comes the duplicate language of Nichamtonu, the two comforts that they said to Rabbi Akiva. And according to what it's known as in Yonim from Torah Shabal Pek, that aspects of the written Torah, such as the Posik over here in the Haftorah, Nachamu, Nachamu, so aspects of the written Torah, Veren Nisparish V'Nisbayad B'Torah Shabal Peh, are articulated and explained in the oral Torah. Is al derech zeh b'nidan. Same thing in our case. We will learn from the way it is in the oral Torah in the end of Masechta Makkos, the Nicham Torah Nicham Tonu, to understand the pasuk that we read in the Haftorah, Nachamu Nachamu Am. Base. So the Rebbe quotes now the Gemara. B'siyum Masechta Makkos zog the Gemara. In the end of Tractate Makkos, the Gemara states, Ukvar hoyer Rabbi Gamliel v'Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah v'Rabbi Yehoshua, that they would. These were the three sages: Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Yehoshua, and the Rabbi Akiva. And then there was also Rabbi Akiva. Ma'alchim baderech. They were going on the road. V'shamu koil hamoyna shel Rebbe. As the Rebbe will say later on, they were going to try to intervene with the government to ease up on the decrees against the Yidden. So, as they were going in the road, they heard koil hamoyna shel Royim mefalto berochik meyav esrim mil. They heard the voice of all the partying and the noises of the Romans, that it was going 120 mil far. That's how much the noise was. They can hear it. So the other of the rabbis began to cry. But Rabbi Akiva was laughing. So the other rabbi said to Rabbi Akiva, how come? Why are you laughing? So he responded to them, and you, how come you're crying? So they said to him, Halolu Kushim, these Kushim, and this varies different years over here, but these Kushim, Shemishtachvim la'atzabim, they bow to idols. They put smoke in front, the incense in front of Avodah Zorah. So they are Yoshvim Betach V'Hashket. They're sitting secure and quiet, peaceful. And us, the house, which is the pedestal for the feet of our God, Soruv Ba'esh, is burnt in fire. So shall we not cry for that? So that's what they respond to Rabbi Akiva, why he is crying, why they are crying. So Rabbi Akiva says to them, Lekachani Mesachik. That's the reason why I'm laughing. Since you see that even those who violated God's will, they get to celebrate as they are being partying over there. How much more so those who do Hashem's will have a lot more. How much more so? Then there was another story. Another time they were going up to Yerushalayim. They came to Mount Scopus, from which you can see Yerushalayim and the Beis Hamikdash. As the halacha is, they rendered their garments, they did kriya. And kivon shehigiu lahar habayis, once they came to the Temple Mount, they saw there was a fox that came outside and left the house, the compartment of the room of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holiest. So they started crying, but Rabbi Akiva Mesachik, and Rabbi Akiva was laughing. So again the sages say to Rabbi Akiva, how come you're laughing? He said to them, how come you're crying? So they said to him, Mokim shakosu boy. You have a space over here, the Kodesh HaKadoshim, over there it's written, any stranger that comes close shall be put to death. And that's really talking about the Avodah. The Rebbe will discuss this as well. Azor that does Avodah, why he brings this pasuk over here. But now we have Foxen walking around over there. How could we not cry? So he said to them, that's exactly why I am laughing. The pasuk says, I will take for me trustworthy witnesses to testify about the redemption that it's going to come. But it says, who's going to take the Edom? It says, Asuriya HaKoyen, the Kohen Yiriyah, Zechariah ben Yevarachiyahu, and Zechariah the son of Yevarachiyahu. So these two witnesses didn't even live at the same time. Frekter v'chima inyan. The Gemara brings down v'chima. This is Rabbi Akiva saying to them, v'chima inyan Uriah etzel Zechariah. What kind of a connection does Uriah have to Zechariah? Uriah b'migdash rishon. Uriah was in the first base of Migdash. Uzechariah b'migdash sheni, and Zechariah was during the time for the second base of Migdash. Well, how could we pair together these two witnesses? Elo, but rather putting them together means that Tola Kosum Nevuosah shel Zechariah b'Nevuosah shel Uriah. The Eibishter hinges the prophecy. These are two witnesses, meaning that their prophecies hinge on one another. The prophecy of Zechariah hinges on the prophecy of Uriah. But Uriah Kisiv, Uriah, he was foretelling the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. It says, Lochein beglalchem, therefore, because of you, Sion soda techodesh, Sion will be plowed like a field of goyim. And then the Zechariah Kisiv, in the pasuk in Zechariah, it's written in the promise of the salvation and the future redemption. The pasuk says, "Oid Yeshu zkenim uzkenim zkenos b'rechovis Yerushalayim." There will still be the time when the elder men, the elder women, will sit in the streets of Yerushalayim. So, what's the connection? Here we have the great prophecy of Zechariah, and against the backdrop of the very serious punishment of Uriah that said Sion Soda Techorish. So therefore Rabbi Akiva says like this: until the time that the prophecy of Uriah that Sion Soda Techorish will be fulfilled, then I worried that perhaps the prophecy of Zechariah will also not be fulfilled until I saw that it's fulfilled. Now that the prophecy of Uriah did come to be, then I know that the prophecy of Zechariah of Yeshu's the positive and the good that's going to happen for Yerushalayim, I know that that prophecy of Zechariah will be fulfilled. So the following is the language that the sages used to Rabbi Akiva. They said to him, Akiva, Nichamtonu, Akiva, Nichamtonu. Akiva, you have comforted us, and Akiva, you have comforted us. Now, what's the reason? Why did the rabbi see it one way and Rabbi Akiva saw it the other way? It's not just something. The rabbi wants to say, even though this is a part of the Agoda of the Torah, the expounding part of the Torah of the Medrash, the Agoda of Torah, but yet it would be fitting to find a halachic and to be a logical argument over here, halachic, to the difference of opinions between Rabbi Akiva and the Chacham. V'hinei, Afal Pia, the Gemara Hanal is from Chelek HaGoda Shel B'Torah, even though that this piece of Gemara is from the section of the Agoda of Torah, Zaklal, and we have a rule. As Ein Lemeidim Halacha MeAgoda, you can't learn a law from Agoda. So that means Agoda is its own section in Torah, and from the Agoda you can't learn halachas. Is dos b'shaz the limud from Agoda is b'stirat to halacha. That is when, if what you want to learn out from the Agoda is contradicts halacha, then you can't learn from the Agoda against halacha. Aber oibes is nit kein stira, but when there is no contradiction, we do learn halachic matters from Agoda, and you do rely on them. So it doesn't mean that you can't learn halach from Agoda. It means that when it's a contradiction, then we don't. But when you do, when there's no contradiction, then you do learn out from that also with regards to halach. It brings down from the Pirush Yosh Rabbeinu Tam in the notes of it. And The Rebbe says further. I feel him tim as nit up von agoda halacha l'maisa bepoil. Even if you're going to you're going to argue that you cannot learn from agoda a ruling to practice in actuality. But an idea in halacha you could learn. In other words, we can represent a halachic idea, which is an idea in halacha to explain a hagoda. Noisab alanal, in addition to all the above, the Rebbe further argues that this was also something which had to do with an actual action. They made they came to Har Tzofim and they read the garment. That's something which is practiced. So the Rebbe said, "Noisab anal is benit the dan nit not divragoda." This is not just agodic words, nor a ma'aser rab. We're talking here about a full action, a complete action of that he actually did over here, because a ma'aser bepoil, something which was done in actuality. The gedola tanoim b'halocham zer gefirt, how the great sages in halacha, how they conducted themselves to learn from that. Und the Braise the Braise enumerates who these sages were, Koil Rabbi Akiva, including them Rabbi Akiva. These were some of the giant Kulu Aliba de Rabbi Akiva. The entire oral Torah, says the Gemara, is according to Rabbi Akiva, from Rabbi Akiva's students. That's where the Torah is sustained, and all the halachas come from basically Kulu, according to Rabbi Akiva. Is moving bepashtu, so it's understood very simply. As in them seine Veran kamas svoris was seine negel halacha. That in this story there are several ideas, many ideas that are connected to halacha. Ubefrat, especially as in dem zweiten Fall wird erzählt nicht nur wegen Beuchim und Mesachik, nor euch wegen Meise halacha bepoil. The second case that's brought down, besides that, it's also crying and laughing. That's also actions, but talks about the kriya. It happened with Ma'aser Halacha Bepoil. Kivon shegiu laHaratzofim. When they reached the Mount Scopus, they came to Haratzofim. Karu bigdeya. They rendered their garments. They didn't levedocha. That's the halacha to do so. You have to, when you see the Mount Haratzofim, you see the destruction. That's you have to rip your garment. So we see that this wasn't just a story here. Here's a halacha that, and we do so, as brought down by the Rabbeinu Gershom. So based on the above, that we say that this is associated with halacha, and let's understand, the Rebbe says, as the Gemara uses in various different area. What is the logic of the svaras, the disagreement between the different rabbis and Rabbi Akiva? What are the halachic ideas? That they become the reason and the cause was the Chacham Manal Zayin Mechuluk with Rabbi Akiva, that these above mentioned sages are disagreeing with Rabbi Akiva. This is from one extreme to the other extreme. From Boichin to Mesachik, on one hand you have those rabbis crying, and you have Rabbi Akiva laughing. As the Gemara Firtois, and although the Gemara concludes, Amru lo Akiva nechamton, Akiva nechamton. They said to him, Akiva, you comforted us, Akiva, you comforted us. Is the move on, so it's understood as a havim in the Bashilu Boichin, that their original thought that brought him to crying, an ort in Svaras Halacha also has some space, has room in the ideas of Halacha to cry when you see that. Befrat, as in erstes Sipur wird nicht der Mond gesagt, Akiva nechamtonu. In the first story, it's not mentioned that they said, Akiva, you comfort us, meaning that they may have not fully accepted the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. So it means that their idea to Boichin is a reason that stands. Mashma, der Fun was Shuvas Rabbi Akiva, And it's also appeared that they weren't comforted because Rabbi Kiva answered them by the Erste Mura hat sie nicht abgehalten. That did not prevent them from crying by the Zweite Mura. By the second, they still continue crying, meaning that they did not accept what Rabbi Kiva said. Otherwise, they wouldn't have cried again when the next thing happened, when they were going to the Harat Tzofim. Shuv Pamachas, it happened again. Why? So that means it wasn't accepted. Basically, the Rebbe gives this whole introduction to tell us that he wants to find, the Rebbe is going to find halachic differences, nafkemina between Rabbi Kiva's idea and the other Rabbonim's idea and the other Chacham's idea. And the Rebbe says, even though this is a story in Agoda, yet over here in this particular case, B'chlal in Agoda, to find a halachic rationalization for their conduct is definitely appropriate. The Rebbe is looking for that rational explanation, as the Rebbe will explain later on, the differences between the approach. But before the Rebbe does that, the Rebbe is going to ask several other questions about this Gemara and the details, and many of the details that the Gemara brings down the end of Makis. Ois Gimel. Euch darf man verstehen, kamo di Yukim, in Teuchen vehemshech hasipurim hanal, in the content and the flow of the above mentioned story, umehem, the Rebbe will ask several of them, and quite a few questions the Rebbe places over here. And these are some of the questions in the language that the Rebbe mentions, and apparently that there's a lot of other questions that the Rebbe does not mention that will be answered as well. Aleph. So number one is, was is given the Shaila from Rabbi Akiva mipnei ma'at ambach. What was the question? Why did Rabbi Akiva all of a sudden ask, why are you crying? As it is something very obvious. As b'shas men hert koil hamoinu shel roi michulu. When you hear the sound of the fanfare, the noises going out of Rome, that destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, especially when the second story, in which there was a fox coming out of the Beis Hamikdash, as Mazed and Beis Hamikdash that you see, the Beis Hamikdash in this great destruction, you have a fox coming out of the Holy of Holies. So this should bring out a mourning, a sense of mourning and crying. So what's the question about Kiva is asking? Why are you crying? Number two, it's even more not understood. That which is related in the second story. Said right, it says once they reached the Mount Tzofim, this Mount Scopus, they rendered their garments. Is bepashtus. So simply, this is mashma for stimas v'hemshech haloshin, as it appears from the closed and flow of the language. As Rabbi Kiva does giton, that Rabbi Kiva also behaved in such a way that he did what they did. He rendered his garment as well. Those hays, that means as Rabbi Kiva thereby gitroyer, that also Rabbi Kiva at this point he was also mourning on the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. He was frekter danach. So why is he asking later on? Why are you crying? He himself rendered his garment, as it seems from the Lashon Pashtus and Stimas Haloshin, that he rendered it as well. So why is he asking why you're crying? Himmel, number three, the verse that he brings down seems to be not a verse about the entering of the Beis Hamikdash, but rather avodah. Why did he bring this verse? They're posig v'hazor hakorev yumos. When they say, so they said that because the posig says a stranger that comes close should be put to death. That does not discuss the entrance of a non-Kohen or non-Kohen Gadol into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Nor wegen Azor was tut an Aved in Beis Hamikdash, but rather about a non-Kohen who does a service in the Beis Hamikdash. Und wie bald, as the Tanoim haben gewollt, madgish sein dem Isur, since they wanted to emphasize the prohibition, afila von Knissin Kodesh HaKadoshim, even just to enter the Kodesh HaKadoshim, haben sie doch gedacht, bringen dem Posik, they should have brought the verse, Val Yovi B'cholei Salah Kodesh, a Posik should not come, even the Kohen Gadol should not come at all times to the Kodesh, was a statement Kodesh, wo steht beforish, over there it's very explicit, it says explicitly, as a fila kohen gadol tornit arayni kodesh hakadosh b'chol hashana, that even the kohen gadol is not allowed to enter into the kodesh hakadoshim all year round. So that's the pasuk they should bring, versus bringing a pasuk that a non-kohen cannot do avodah, but to say you can't even enter. They wanted to try to bring out how much even the entrance to the Beis Hamikdash, to the Kodesh HaKadoshim, for sure, is a serious matter. They should have brought the pasuk where the Kohen Gadol himself is not allowed to go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Dalet, Bosi Derkos Al Kadaita for Rabbi Akiva. What is his thought? He says he wasn't sure that maybe the prophecy will not be fulfilled. Until I hadn't seen that the prophecy of Uri has been fulfilled, I was worried maybe the prophecy of Zechariah will not be fulfilled. How does it even connect and be a question that a prophecy will not, God forbid, be fulfilled? He says, I wasn't sure if it's going to take place. Especially when you take into consideration the saying of our sages of blessed memory, called dibur v'dibur sheyotze mipi HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'tova. Every word and word that comes out from Hashem's mouth for the good, even on condition he did not retract. So, if the Navi says Uriah, for sure it's going to take place, why does he say I wasn't sure? Hey, number 5, Farvos bringt Rabbi Akiva Davke the Nevuah Tzion so that the Chodesh. Why does he specifically bring the prophecy that Zion will be plowed like a field? Unit can under friedliche Nevuah von Churban Nagula, not a different and an earlier verse previous to this prophecy about the destruction and the redemption, but he brings Davke this pasuk of Tzion Soda Techodesh. Bob. So Livos is the Gemara mefared the name of the other Tanoim. Why is the Gemara detail the names of all of the Tanoim? Beikir is doch negeit zu sagen. Mainly, it's important to tell us as Rabbi Akiva gehat an andere Deye, that he had a different opinion and a different conduct than these other rabbis. So it could have been written, as we find in many places, it happened that Rabbi Akiva and the elders, it says elders without specifying and detailing the names. Is similar to it. Number 7. How come the sages only by the second happening? They said of their tshuva for Rabbi Akiva. When Rabbi Akiva answered them, they said Akiva nechamtono, only by them erst, but they didn't say it by the first one. Ches, the Gemara uses this. This was the language that they used to say to Akiva. They said to him, Akiva, you comfort us. Akiva, you comfort us. Was is der kefil kol haloshin? Why is there a duplication of the entire language? Akiva nechamtono, Akiva nechamtono. Not even saying like Akiva nechamtono, nechamtono, but Akiva nechamtono, Akiva nechamtono. Und die Bavornish, what do we have to forewarn here and say? Beloshin hazeh, beloshin hazeh. This was the language they used. The Marsho zogt of them kushe zayin v'ches, and the questions 7 and 8. Why is the duplicate loshin? Kofla al dvorim. The reason they repeated it al shem shnei hamaisim shezochar. that goes on the two stories that happened. So basically, they actually did comfort him on the previous one, and that's hinted by saying Akiva Nechamtonu for the first one and Akiva Nechamtonu for the second one. Aber euch der Tirutz fordert Hasbara, but also this answer requires explanation. Die Shnei Hamaisim seien doch gewähnt behefsig Zman und Mokum. These two stories took place with an interruption in place and time. The erste Maisi is given Kishoyu Malchim Baderech. The first story took place when they were walking on the road. Zukumen dik zu Rome, as they were approaching Rome. And the zweite, and the second one, Shuva, happened again. Kishoyu Oilim Yerushalayim, they were going up to Yerushalayim. So wie werden sie zusammengenommen? How could you combine them in just in one case, in themselves and enter the same answer, saying that this goes on this one and that one. This happened at the second time, it's a different time. How do we apply it to something which happened earlier in a different place at a different time? So the Rebbe first says in Ois Daled, explaining the difference maybe is between what is the approach. Do you see the purpose or you see the present of it, what it's right now, whether you look at it as a positive, when you see things are not really looking good. And at the end of the day, everything from Hashem is for the good. So you can see, even in the negative, the positive. That was the difference. Because we know Rabbi Akiva always said whatever the Eibishter does was for the good. So therefore, he was able to see, even in the negative, that there was good there. Simply, we can explain. As in Beide Muro, Zetman de Nekuda Meshutefes in der Shita, in both of these cases, happenings, you see the common point in the view from Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Lezer ben Azari, Rabbi Yeshua Mitzad Echad. The view of Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Lezer ben Azari, and Rabbi Yeshua on one hand, and Rabbi Akiva Mitzad Hashem, and Rabbi Akiva on the other hand. Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Lezer ben Azari, and Rabbi Yeshua haben in jeder Meure gesehen dem Inyan Haloi Tov Shebazeh. In everything that happened, in each of these cases, they saw the negative, the non-good part in it. Und Rabbi Akiva hat euch in sie gesehen, but Rabbi Akiva also saw in them tachlis v'toichan hatoiv, the goal and the good contents. Und Rabbi Akiva geht bazel l'shitosei verzog b'mokam achar. Rabbi Akiva follows his view that he says elsewhere to try to find the good. A person should always be accustomed to say, Kol the Ovid Rahman Latav Ovid, whatever the Eibishter does is for the good. With the Gemara that as the Gemara relates, that he would say Hashem does everything for the good. So the Gemara relates that that was actually his conduct. He would say for the good. When his donkey and his the chicken, they were eaten up, he said that was for the good because that's the way. At the end, it turned out it saved his life. Only them was the Gemara bring According to this, we can explain why the Gemara brings both of these stories and one flow. Although they took place in different places and different times. It's not just because these two stories took place with the same rabbis, the same Tanoim. Nor weil in beide Muros gefitman, but rather because in both of these happenings you find the Zelba Nekuda in Shidas Rabbi Akiva, that same point in the view of Rabbi Akiva, to zen behoive, to see in the present, in jeder Zach, in every item, the benefit and the good that eventually comes out from it. So that's a common thread between both of these cases. But the Rebbe doesn't accept this explanation. Hey, aber apia now darf man verstehen. Then we need to understand according to that. So it turns out that Rabbi Akiva basically said 3 times. Not only in those 2 times did he see the good, but also the other case that the Rebbe quoted from Kol Mad the Oved Rachmana Letav Oved, which is the Gemara in Brachas. So now we have 3 times Rabbi Akiva saying it. So now we need to know the tzrichosa from the Aladrai. Why do we need to have each one of these cases to still say that the present is good, even though it seems that there is negative here? What is the chidush in Shittas Rabbi Akiva in the Beida Sipurim? What is the novelty? What is the something new in the view of Rabbi Akiva in these 2 stories? And in saying whatever Hashem does is for the good. Base. And number 2, the Rebbe says there's really whatever happens is for the good. There's no disagreement from that, not unlike over here. So that's an idea which is acceptable, but it means that Rabbi Akiva applied that idea to here, and the rabbis didn't apply it to here. Base. A person should always be accustomed to say, whatever Hashem does is for the good, is a klal in welchen men gefitnet ke machloikes. That's a rule which we don't find any disagreement. That's the way it's actually ruled in the Shulchan Aruch. Is nit mistaber, so therefore it's not really likely as the Tanoim, Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Yeshua, that all these Tanoim zone if them kriegen that they should be disagreeing on that. And more as a viele by the zweiten Meura, was sie haben gesagt, Akiva nemecham tonu, even though they say you comforted us, what we don't see is that Mukhrach Hazeh Mecharote Gat from Zeir. It is not necessarily, we don't have to say that they changed, that they regretted their opinion. They still are with their view, so they can hold Kol Madav Rachmon La'al Tav of it, and he can tell them to extend it. Rabbi Akiva extends it to that case, to both of these cases in the stories that we went with them. They say that he comforted them, but they didn't change their mind. So we won't say that, and yet they will agree to Kol Madav Rachmon La'tav of it. So while in this specific cases they probably they still disagree, he comforted them. So why is it? How is this different? The case of Kol Madav Rachmon La'tav of it is across the board. It's the halacha, and nobody disagrees with that. It's not likely that they should disagree with that. And yet, on these cases, in when the fax comes out of the Kodesh HaKadoshim or the noise, the parting that comes from Remi, they still disagree. So what's the ideas over here? Gimel. The Fianal, if this is the case according to the above, because you have to see the positive and everything, so he should have said, when he responded, he should have given the point of his view. He should have said, Kol David Rachmon Letav Ovid, the principle, whatever Hashem does for the good. And then following that, if it's necessary, the Raya Proti is the specific, detailed evidence in that case to tell the explanation as he explained it in the final the Gemara. So we're still left with all the question: what is the point of the machlokes between Rabbi Akiva? It's more than just Kol Madav Rachmon La'tav of it. That's everybody agrees. Each of these cases has something more. So the Rebbe begins the explanation that Menes Verstehen Bahagdim Abir from the Gemara Bepashtus by explaining the Gemara simply. The question we have is, Why did they start crying at that certain point? The fact that the Goyim were partying, that was something that was known to them. The Beis Hamikdash is destroyed is known to them. What happens that right now it becomes in such a way that it brings out that special emotion of crying? So, der Tam of der Tmiya for Rabbi Akiva, what's the reason why Rabbi Akiva is wondering why you crying? Is the bald azem ongem vein and dan, since they only started to cry at the point when when they heard the great fanfare, the noise, the partying coming from Reimi, isn't it free and not? Why did not cry earlier? Is der fun muchach? So from that it's evident as bechiriyo is not solid that etzem yidi as Reimi is betoikif, that their crying is not because of the knowledge itself that they know that the Romans are in force now. Die Balze haben davon gewusst noch Eder, sie seinen Areis Baderach. They knew about that even before they went on the road. They know that the Romans were in force. Noch mehr, not only did they know that in force, they were going to plead for the Jewish cause by them. Noch mehr, they're going, the purpose of their going to Rome was to mevatel sein die Gesedes of Eden, was in order to annul the decrees that was against Jews. And that was the reason that they were allowed to go, the Rebbe says in the footnote, to go out from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz over there. Because it was to annul the decrees. And why do they have to go? The Mizmach Machtoikef HaGolus. This is all because the force of exile, that we're in such a strong exile that we have to go to the Goyim to ask them to annul those terrible decrees against the Jews. So they knew that the Romans are in charge. The same thing we have in the second story. Why did they cry when they came to Mount Scopus? The crying was not for the destruction itself, that the fact that there is a destruction. Ubefrat as if Churban is mefurish as nor koribig day, especially about the actual destruction. What is clear, what it says specifically, that they rendered the garment. It doesn't say they cried. Noch früher, that took place before they saw the facts coming out. Nor sibes abchi is given. What was the cause for the crying? Is kibon shero shu al chulu is chileim b'chim. Once they saw that fox coming out, that's when they started crying. So, how do we explain the question of Rabbi Akiva? He's asking them, what caused you to cry at this point? The Ribot Rabbi Akiva gefragt. That's what Rabbi Akiva asked. Why are you crying? Was is bei zei it's nischadish geworden? What came about right now that because of this you started to cry? That was his question. The Rebbe explains now that really the emotional crying that was brought out was at the desecration of the name of Hashem that takes place over here, not just the Churban itself. Zayir, they had entered to Rabbi Akiva. What is their response to Rabbi Akiva? Halolu kushim chulum, yoishvim betach. These kushim, they sit securely v'hashket and in peace. V'onu beis hadoim raglei lekenu. And us, the house of the pedestal of the feet of our God, soruv b'eish, is burnt in fire. Pirusha, what it means is like this. The etzem zag v'os malchus roimi is an amatza from betach v'hashket. The fact itself that the Romans are in a position, a situation, that they're sitting secure and peaceful in Gashmis dikevelt Zachen, in physically worldly matter, that did not really bother them, that takes up the space to feel bad so they should cry. Adrabah. On the contrary, the fact that they were a powerful government was better for the Yidden. Those was Malchus Roimi is betoikev. Ubetach, the fact that the Roman government is with force and secure, is Gor L'Toivus Yisrael. That's for the benefit of the Yidden. Because as the Pasuk says, Va'el V'hal Levonin Ba'adir Yipel. The Levonin, the Beis HaMikdosh, Ahora Toiva Zeva Levonin, the Beis HaMikdosh, Yerushalayim, is going to fall in the hands of an Adir, of someone powerful. That's honorable. If the Yerushalayim fell to a weak nation, that wouldn't be respectful. Voram hayois as a koil lefiha mevaish ve'amisbaish. When you measure shame, depends on who is the one that's shaming and who is the one that is being shamed. Is the busha feel clemeret? There's a much less of embarrassment than the nefila from Levon and Beis Hamikdosh is davkedur hamal zadira. When the fall of the Lebanon, the Beis Hamikdosh, that's the Levonin, is specifically through a powerful government. The Rebbe says it was a yumtok. That's why it also now is sweetened. Was in Zeir Entferum ze nit ongehebt momadisch gewesen. So when they answered, they didn't start and they didn't emphasize as Malchus Roimi hat Chorv gemacht dem Beis Hamikdosh und doch ist sie betöket. They didn't say that they destroyed the Beis Hamikdosh and still they're forceful. Better vashkim. Rabbi, that's not an issue to say that there's that they destroyed it and they're secure. This is for the benefit of the this eases up, it makes it easier, the sense, the feel of shame, etc. Kinal as mentioned before. But what was their argument there? Tiny is given, the argument was they are secure and they are at peace in that sight at the same time when us, the house of the pedestal of the feet of our God, is burnt in fire. Is achil shem shamayim. This is a desecration of the name of Hashem. Noisef oifem chilul shem Yisrael, in addition to the desecration of the name of the Jewish people. Nochben. The bald roimis ganze toikef is nor bichdei. Since the reason for the force of roimis is only so that it should be fulfilled, that the Lebanon, the Beis Hamikdash should fall in the hands of a powerful one. Hein farvos is roimin noch als. How come Rome is still Adir? Why is it still Adir? Better v'hashkich, and it's secure and at peace. It's also a present when the Beis Hamikdash is shown from Frira, sort of the Beis Hamikdash is already burnt. It's already happened. Why are they present? So it's the comparison makes it Achil Hashem, and the fact that it's present, even though the need for being Adir was before, and it still continues that way. Similar is also a similar way explaining the second happening. When they saw the fox coming out from Kodesh HaKadoshim, they saw within it a desecration of the name Hashem and the name of the Yidden. That was a desecration. In addition to the destruction, there was a desecration of the name of Hashem and the name of Yidden. In a place in which it's written that a stranger, a non-kohen, who comes close shall be put to death. As Cain Id will die. As Cain Id tor dort nit afile den nenten sich. That no Jew is permitted to even come close. Even a high priest, der Kodesh HaKadoshim, who is considered to be the high priest, that's the holiest amongst the people. He's the Kodesh HaKadoshim from Eden. He's the holiest of the holiest among the Eden. He also is not permitted to enter. Besides once a year, Yom Kippur, and that's the way he can come in with the karbonis and everything else that he brings. Basically, he's also considered a stranger, has no rights to the Beis Hamikdash. And now there's foxes walking around there. Das heißt, what does it mean? The Nekuda Vazer Tain is given, the point of the argument is given. Sie ist Take Nigzer geworden, yet let it be the case that there has been decreed as the Beis Hamikdash soll Chorah werden, that the Beis Hamikdash should be destroyed. Und Eden sollen vertrieben werden in Golos, and the Jews should be chased away into exile. Aber verwo soll dabei sein, Azach Chilul Hashem v'Chilul Shem Yisrael. But why does it need to be such a desecration of the name of Hashem and the desecration of the name of Israel? Golus, okay, destruction, yeah, but why a Chilul Hashem? What's the Chilul Hashem? Number one, Malchus Reime muss doch nicht bleiben better v'hashkeit. Malchus Reime does not need to remain secure and at peace, even after the Beis Hamikdash has been destroyed. Beis. And number two, the Nevuas HaChurban, Tzion Sada Chodesh, that Tzion will be plowed like a field, that Yerushalayim is going to be destroyed like plowing a field. That could have been fulfilled by the andere Chalokim from Beis Hamikdash. That could have been filled the other sections of the Beis Hamikdash. Und nicht davke in dem Ort von Kodesh HaKadoshim, not specifically in the place of the holiest of holiest. An Ort wo afile benegedem heiligst nid, even the Kodesh HaKadoshim amongst Yidden. The holiest Jew is ongevor, zogevor, vazora korev Yunus, that the stranger that comes close is dies. So why do we need that fulfillment in such an extreme that in the Kodesh HaKadoshim this happened? So what does Rabbi Akiva answer in Oisches? So Rabbi Akiva answers that the severity and the chilul Hashem of the destruction actually brings a greater reward later on. He saw in the further destruction more and greater. And this is a question, halacha, that Rebbe will explain what overrides the increase and the greater destruction, whether that justifies presently the level of Rabbi Akiva Mesachik or the other Chachamim Boich. Ches, them what Rabbi Akiva geantwortet, and on this Rabbi Akiva answered, Uma le'oivreiret zoyne kach lo'iser zoyne lachas kam v'kam. If those who violate the will of Hashem, this is what they get. Those who do Hashem's will, for sure. Emes as durch them. Vosroimi is betach hashkeit beis as beis elikenu soru beish. That the fact that the Rome is secure and at peace at the time when the God's house is burnt in fire is achil shem shemayim shem Yisrael. It's a desecration of the name of Hashem, the name of Israel, the name of the Yidden. But through them, but not them, but through this later on, says the reward and the goodness, the benefits will be with more force. If for the violation of the Ratzon of Hashem is such, those who do his will for sure. Das heißt, Rabbi Akiva euch in der Hatzloche von der Roimi. Rabbi Akiva saw not only in the force of Roimi, but in the success of Roimi. And even the desecration of the name of Hashem and the name of the Yidden. He saw the good that came as a result from this. So he said, he saw that the severity and the greater Chilul Hashem, that is actually brings out a greater benefit. And similarly in the second story. Since the prophecy of the destruction has been fulfilled in the greatest, fullest measure, to the extent that the fox comes out from the Holy of Holies, is those gufa hayichocha, then that itself is the proof as the Nevuos HaGeula from Zechariah, that the prophecy of redemption from Zechariah, that Mekuyim Veren will become, not just be fulfilled, but ba'oifen achinayla, in the greatest way. He never had a doubt as the Nekuyim Veren, as the Nevuah Vet Mekuyim Veren, that it is going to be fulfilled, the prophecy of Uriah would be fulfilled. The Sofik is given, is not given in an oifnaki. The question, the doubt he has, how is it going to become about? See, is it going to be in the total highest way? Or the nit? Or not? We find similarly many promises of the Torah that there's two possibilities. It can be on a lower level and a bigger level. When he said he wasn't sure, not whether it's going to be fulfilled, but what's the extent? To what extent is the prophecy? At what level is it going to be fulfilled? Valderech by Soda Techoresh. This example is by the field that is plowed. Ken zayin di tzmicha al yidei zeh. How could you have growing? You need to plow the field. Then you grow. You can grow the field. You can collect. You can harvest because you plowed. Nochmer me'er she'orim. You can harvest 100 times as much as the pasuk says by Yitzchak. Nochmer can be the extent that the chitim were kikloyis, as the pasuk says in Teres Kohanim, as brought down in Teres Kohanim, that they'll grow like kloyis. So that's going to be big as kidneys. That's the size. Nochmer. It's going to be as it's going to be in the future. That when you're plowing and they're already cutting, so that's how fast. So it can be very different way. So through the way that the fulfillment, how Hashem fulfilled and did the promise of the Churban when he told what Uriah prophesied, Gizen, he saw as der Kiyum Hanevuah from the Geula Vetzayin Boifne Chenala, that also the fulfillment of the prophecy is going to be on the highest level. Al Pizeh is move on, Favosa bringt do Davke the Nevuah Sion, so that the Chodesh. That's why he brings specifically the prophecy that Sion will be plowed like a field. The Inyan for Charishus Sode, the idea, why do you plow a field? Is neat. If Kalamachan the Sode, then that's to ruin the field. But Rabbi, the contrary, Charish is a hechrech. Plowing is a necessity. You have to do that. Kidei disodes l'kumen l'shleimusa. So the field should come to its wholesomeness. V'nos noris yivula, so that the earth should give its produce. You got to plow it. Durch them is noch dem ditzmiche kideboy. Through this, then it grows properly. Was mer men so that the more you break up the field, you plow the field, the more als besser is this ria, better is the sowing, und noch dem ditzmiche, then what grows. Und al derech ze binyoneinu, similar is in our case. Der Churban Beis Hamikdash is bedugmat zu Cherisha. The destruction of the Beis Hamikdash is similar to plowing. Was davke durch fun ir, it's specifically through plowing, and from it kum der Yisren in Tzmichas HaGeula, you get the advantage of the sprouting of the Geula, and the river, and therefore when the Rabbi Akiva Gizen, when he saw as der Churban, the Charisha, der Gericht Atach B'Sei, that this destruction, the plowing, reached its ultimate. This Sumokim Kodesh HaKadoshim, that it read till the Kodesh HaKadoshim. He says, Ba'im given ha'yichocha. To him it was evidence, it was a proof. As oich the Geula Tzmicha, that also the redemption, the growing, that Zayin B'Tachlis Ha'ilu will be in the total, in the greatest elevation. Oistes. So based on this explanation that the Rabbi Akiva saw in the fulfillment of the full penalty, the fulfillment, and also in the future, the reward is going to be so much greater. We can explain now in halachic terms the idea whether the present situation should be determining about a mitzvah that you have to deal in the future. As the Rebbe will bring down the examples. Test. Al pizeh kemen mevar sein die chiluki deis in der machloikes von Rabbi Akiva mit the andere Tanoim. Based on this, we can explain the difference of opinion in regards to the argument from Rabbi Akiva with the other Tanoim. As they seinen tolu in ashayle klolis was megefin become a mitzvah, that this hinges on a general question which we find in many mitzvahs. And the question is, should we consider, and that should be the deciding factor, behoive, in the present, mit a mitzvah v'chiyu v'etkumen ba'osiv, with a mitzvah, an obligation that will come in the future. So what is present will be the deciding factor if you measure it next to a mitzvah that will come in the future, such as, al derech hadugma. Say by way of example, achoyle vos roifim zogun as oiber vet fasten soim gedalya. We have a person who is sick, and the doctor says if he should fast on soim gedalya, that der far nit kenen fasten yom kippurim, so then he won't be able to fast Yom Kippur. Sier meg, is he allowed to, or is he obligated to dar fasten soim gedalya? Should he fast soim gedalya? Vos is achiyu v'divrei Kabbalah. That obligation is only from the words of the Kabbalah. That's from the Nevi'im. Chochas duruch dem, although if he is going to fast, that der nit kennen, he will not be able mekayim zayin ba'osi dem chiv midoraisa. He won't be able to fulfill in the future the obligation of the Torah fasting Yom Kippurim. Can't fast both together. If he's going to fast Yom Gedalia, he won't be able to fast Yom Kippur. But right now we have to consider. Right now, the present, he can fast, so he needs to fast. He's allowed to, or he should fast now. But the other side of the equation is, Ertonich fast on Tem Gedalia. He's not allowed to fast on Tem Gedalia. Kidei Erzolken fast in Yom Kippurim, so that he should be able to fast in Kippur. V'yeshloimar, as das ist euch der Hasbore in der Plukte zwischen Rabbi Akiva und die andere Tanoim. We can say this is also the explanation in the disagreement between Rabbi Akiva and the other Tanoim. As it relates to the desecration of the name Hashem and the name of the Yidden presently, from which after time will come a tremendous elevation for Yidden, and a greater sanctification of Hashem's name. Rabbi Gamaliel, Rabbi Lozer ben Azar, Rabbi Yeshua halten, these Rab Tanoim are of the opinion, as vibal behoive is dos achilul Hashem Godel. Since in the present this is a great desecration of the name of Hashem, is nit machriya, so you can't not decide it. Those was la'achar zman v'der funarish kommen, and this that after time, this will bring out a greater kiddush Hashem. You can't do that. That's not deciding. Nor merechen sich mit nitzkel matzah, but rather we consider the present situation. The baldas behave das heper kiddush im shamayim kiddush. Baldas behave das heper kiddush im shamayim und kiddush shem Yisrael. Nor merechent sich mit nichts gematzah. You consider what it looks like today. Vibald as behoivis dos Eper Kiddushem Shamayim uKiddushem Yisrael. Since presently this is contrary to the sanctification of God's name and the sanctification of the name of Yidden, is dos Eifazei Filra. This is so bad as it brings to Bechir, it brings you to crying. Rabbi Kiva holds, on the other hand, as Oich Behoive is Machriya de Tetzor Shebosit. That also presently the deciding outweighs the results that come in the future. Under Riber Haldo Rabbi Kiva. That's why Rabbi Kiva holds here as Yibald as Fundam Chilul Hashem, Chilul Shem Yisrael Behoive. Since from this desecration of Hashem's name and the desecration of the name of the Yidden Behoive, Vedenoch Arus Kumenan Ilu v'Yisrun Kiddush Hashem v'Kiddush Shem Shemayim, that this will bring Shem Yisrael, since that from the present desecration, eventually this will bring an advantage and an elevation in the sanctity of Hashem's name, the name of the Yidden, Bagul Hasid, in the coming redemption. So that was decided by him in his situation presently. To the extent that he was laughing. He felt the future in the present. That was the deciding fact. And the Rebbe brings down another question, general question is, when one can fulfill a mitzvah in all details, but it will lack perfection. Should you look for perfection, or should you look to fulfill all the details? Let's look inside. Yud. We can say that their machlokes also hinges on in another shaila klolis, on another general question, which is more connected to the content over here. If one can fulfill a mitzvah with all the detail, but that way, by doing that, will be lacking in the general perfection of the mitzvah. You'll do all the details, but the perfection will be lacking. The Rebbe will give the example. If you are going to fulfill the mitzvah in the perfectest way, in the best way, there will be lacking a detail which is not something that holds back the mitzvah, but you'll be missing something. Is the shaila is machriya? The question becomes, what is the overriding, what is the deciding factor? The kima mitzvah is b'chol prateho, to do the fulfillment of the mitzvah with all the details, or the hidur in klolus ha-mitzvah, or the perfection in the mitzvah in general. A dugma lazeh v'loy mamash, an example for this, but not exact, is the shayla achronim, is the question that the achronim pose by bris milah with regard to a circumcision. If you will fulfill the mitzvah in the morning, based on the rule that those who are zrizim, those who are haste, do the mitzvahs in a proper way, they do the mitzvah early on. And if you're going to do it early on, that felon in Berev Am Hadras Melech, it will be lacking. You won't be able to get too many people there. There's a mitzvah to do it also with a lot of Rev Am, should be a lot of people. But in the morning, you can get a lot of people. So if you do it in the morning, you'll be missing in Hadras Melech, in the many people. But on the other hand, if you will delay the bris for a later hour in the day, then you will not be doing a mitzvah that you should do it as quickly as possible. But on that account, You will be fulfilling to the idea that the glory, the beauty of the king is when there's a lot of people. So you do the bris milah with a lot of people. What is machriya? What is the deciding factor? Well, by similar by several other matters. By the mitzvah if by delaying the mitzvah later on, that the mitzvah that you will then fulfill the mitzvah with more perfection in a choicest way. So if you give up on this rizi magdim of mitzvahs, on that part of doing the mitzvah as early as possible, and that will allow you later on to do the mitzvah, even though it's delayed, but you're able to do it with more perfection. So this too consists the machlokes between the Tanoim. As Eden velen bakumen schar far sein oisei de tzoinoi v'chulu, that the Yidden will get paid for doing the Shem's will, and b'shasa geula vet zayin kiddush shem shemayim v'shem Yisrael is special, and that the Jewish people at the time of the redemption, then there will be the sanctification of the name of Hashem of the Yidden. That's obvious. The shaila is, the question, however, is Malchus Remi Sha'ivdim Avodah Zorah, the government of Remi that worships idols, Yoshvim Betach Bahashkit V'onu Beis Chulu Sorov. They're sitting, the Romans who worship idols, sitting securely, peacefully, and our home is burned down. And the other, Shual Shiyotzim Beis Kodesh HaKadoshim, the fox that goes out of the Holy of Holies, Chulu Mokim Shekosubay, a place where it says Vazora Korev Yumas, the one who is not a kohen, a stranger, shall put to death. Is doch schön itzt an inyan from Chilul Shem Shemayim. So that situation presently is a desecration of the name of Hashem. Achisorn in etzem inyan for kiddush Shem Shemayim. So there is something now lacking, just like lacking the zrizim magdimas lemitzvahs over here. There is presently a situation of chilul Shem Shemayim, and there is a lacking in the idea of kiddush Shem Shemayim, of the sanctification of Hashem. What's the other side? Is das was bei Eden wird sein as schar naile be Yoser und nevuas charia wird mekuim werden bei vernifle be Yoser. So on the other side, you have to consider that the Yidden will get a tremendous elevated reward, and that the prophecy of Zechariah will be fulfilled in a wondrous way, in the most perfect way. Is an inyan von Hidrun Toysefis. That's an idea of perfection, addition. In Oidech Yomim, Beriyas to long life and health, Chul B'chalus were generally. Improvement even more than standard, but getting more. In Kiddush Shem Shemayim, in the sanctification name of Hashem, was Vetkumen Shpetel Achar Zman, which will come later after the time. So that is compared to the Berevam Hadras Melech. It will be later on a greater, there's more perfection, but you'll be missing on the, right now there's a Chilul Shem Shemayim. So Loit Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Elazar ben Azari, Rabbi Yeshua, according to these Tanoim, the Baldas eats the Da'achisorn in Etzem V'Kiddush Hashem, since now there is lacking in the sanctification of Hashem, the essence of the Hashem, Chotz as Belav Hochi is La'achar HaChurban Nitok in Kiddush Shem Yisrael V'Kiddush Shem Shemayim. Even without this additional Chilul Hashem, B'chlal, there is no, after the destruction, there is no sanctity of the name of Hashem. There's no sanctity of the name of the Yidden. Can those sein nicht an Eifel for Chilul, but it may not be not sanctity, but it doesn't have to be desecrated. So if there is now a lacking in the Kiddush Hashem, now more, not that there's no Kiddush Hashem, there's an extra lacking, there's a Chilul, a desecration, is not negeya, it's not important that later on you'll get a perfection and there's going to be addition in Kiddush Hashem, in the Kiddush Hashem, because it'll be in a wondrous way, it'll be bigger. That's why they started to cry. Of Bershitas Rabbi Akiva is, but Rabbi Akiva's view is, as the Hidur and Klolus HaMitzvah is Machriya Legabe Aprat in their mitzvah, that the perfection to make the more mitzvah in a more perfect way overrides the detail of the mitzvah, the fact that now there's a lacking, but it's going to be much greater. It's going to be a perfection. The far is the Shpete Diker Hidur Noisef in Klolus in Kiddush Hashem. That's why the later on this additional perfection in the general idea of the sanctification of Hashem's name, Goiver, that overrides, that overpowers on the present lacking, in the etzem from Kiddush Hashem, in the essence of the sanctification of Hashem's name, on the far Messiah, that's why he was laughing. And now the Rebbe will go and explain each one of these cases, how they differ, and Rabbi Akiva needs to say, and we need to say in all cases, even though there are differences between them, in some cases the Chacham will agree, Kol Madav Rachman Letav of it. And in other cases, they disagree. That there is Necham Ton. Let's look inside. Yidalef. Dos is beclose. The Proteus is Doha Tzricha So Nachidish. Specifically, there is a need and a novelty in the Zweiten Sipur Legabe dem Ersten. The second story has a novelty relative to the first one. In the Alle Drei Protim Hanal. In all the three details that we mentioned before. Called the Ovid Rachmon the Tavet Ovid. So we said everything that Hashem does is for the good. It's one idea, general idea. Then we also said do we consider presently with what the outcome will be in the future? And Tziaprat in their mitzvah is machriya legabe hidden in klolus ha-mitzvah, whether a detail in the mitzvah overrides the hidur on the general mitzvah, as the Rebbe explained the view of Rabbi Akiva and the other Tanaim that argue. Das was Rabbi Akiva sagt, called the Ovad Rachmon L'Tavov. This that Rabbi Akiva says, whatever Hashem does for the good, is their pirush. What it means, as Behoiv is das haro. That presently it's a bad. We're saying Hashem does it for the good. It's not saying that now it's good. You're saying presently it's bad. Nor the mekufa for them is L'Tav. The intent is for the good. From der Dugma, as you see from the example, was the Gemara bring by Rabbi Akiva Atzmit, that the Gemara brings by Rabbi Akiva himself. Das was hat genechtigt in Feld, nicht in Stott. The fact that he missed out, they closed the gate and he couldn't go into the city, and he had to sleep in the field, not in the city. Because he was outside of the city, the wind blew out his light, and then his donkey and his chicken that the rooster were eaten up, he lost it. Und das Licht ist verloschen geworden, and the candle was blown out. So is von dem gekommen noch a Teufel von Atzolos Nefoshes. So that came out later on, a favor saved his life. What does that mean? This says the Maisa Guf is Azachtum Tsar Ve'ezek. The story itself is an item, it's something which causes pain, it's a loss. Das ist aber gewent zu Liba Teufel. That was for a benefit. Alpizei is Muba. Wie das steht mit dem Din, was die Gemara sagt. So based on this, we understand how this fits with the halacha that the Gemara says. As bishas es od getroffen an nit gute Passirum, that when something bad happened, even though that later on there's going to be a benefit, there was a flooding over his field. Even though once the flooding passes, it becomes good for him. His field was watered. You make the bracha, blessed is the true judge. But right now it's bad. And in them, this aspect that a person should say, whatever Hashem does is for the good. That they will agree in that case that you say that it's going to be for the good. Eventually, it's going to come out good. That's no disagreement from anybody. Whatever Hashem does is for the good. But right now it's bad, but it's going to be for the good. The Raif to Benid the Dan is, but what is the novelty in this case? It's not that is as in the raw gufo that in what seems bad itself, shul shiyotzim base kodesh kadoshim. The facts going out of the kodesh kadoshim. He didn't just see the later on good result, the top of it. He saw that as a part and the beginning from the goodness. Papi Maimer Azal, from Posik, as the sages, a blessed memory, same on the verse. Kila Hashem es chamosei. Hashem has finished his anger. So seems like Hashem's full anger. Our sages tell us, explain this. That Hashem poured out his whole anger on the wood, on the stone, destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, but not on the people, not on the Bnei Yisrael. Und der Faris ba'osuf, that's what when Osuf said, nit bechila Osuf, he says, nor mizmer la'osuf, it was a song. Even though he says, Kila Hashem es chamosai, but it doesn't matter because this is actually seen as the beginning of the favor. Nor mizmer la'osuf. Und wenn und durch was is geworden Kilo legamre chamosai, what, when, and how was this anger completely finished? When the foxes are going to the worst of the punishment. On Yerushalayim, Ayin Gomer. The Rebbe is referring here. There's also the Nusach in the Ein Yaakov that brings the rest of the pasuk over there. Yerushalayim Ayin Tia v'Harabayis L'Bamas Yor. So that's the pasuk that the Rebbe refers to over here. But however, in the first story, Although that there too, it was laughing. Unoich dem is do unoich dem is do an oif I've called the Ovid Rachmana the Tav of it. In the first story with Rabbi Akiva, was Aleph mezocht umeveis nor, because when you say letav, you just know that it's meveis obenit, as is nit niker v'nigla vos der tavis. You don't know what it is going to be. You can't recognize, and it's not revealed what it's all good about. Beis as is arovos letav of it, and it's bad that it's going to become for good. Aber euch, wenn der ganze Inje wollt milachatchila nit given, if the whole thing didn't take place, wollt euch given tav, that would also be good. So the bad is going to lead to good, but what happens that didn't have, like in the story with the dogma by Rabbi Akiva, Eber wollt nit gehad dem chamoir und dem tarnagol chulu milachatchila, had he not had the donkey, the tarnagol, and the rooster, wollt doch euch nitzel geworden. He would have also been saved. Mashenke ben in the dan mal every let's say nekachlos let's say lachas kamo when he says that if he sees them getting then the Eisheritzone Aleph Zeter Kach, he says so, he sees such in was is bastet of Tev what it consists. Beis as come to at Elus Maila from them, Mervi Blavoch, it gets a benefit more than without it. Without the loss by Rabbi Akiva, they wouldn't need anything. But here, you see the benefit. So you see the advantage of what Rabbi Akiva sees in this case. It is not, however, in a way that is part and the beginning of the good. You see what it's going to be, and you see that there's advantage you need it. So that explains the idea of Tav. Al derech zeh is the andere zwei shaylas. The other two questions, possibilities that the Rebbe brought down before. Loiter hasbora de tetzor sheba'osid. That the result of the future is machriya the oifen peulas hamitzvah shebehoive. That is that decides how the mitzvah should be done presently. Azoy oich loiter svara, same thing according to the other idea, as the hidur bechlolus hamitzvah is machriya, overrides the perfection of the mitzvah in the future, overrides the gabi den prata mitzvah atzma, then a detail of the mitzvah itself, this rizim akademim, as we talked about before. Is doch der tam derbei bechlal. So what is the reason? Das is machriya und goiver, because that decides and overpowers, that is stronger. Das heißt, in der peula shebehoive, that means in the act that you're doing presently, and if you consider the detail of the mitzvah, there's taka lacking because you're not doing it. But it's again the maila shebeosid, the advantage of the future, und der hidur bechlal, or the general perfection is goyveru machriyadam chesorin, that overpowers and that decides that's what is lacking. But we're dealing with lacking, and we're saying that that is the deciding factor. And generally, this isn't the first story. But in our case, in the second story, is just Ladas Rabbi Akiva, according to Rabbi Akiva's view, nit belois begeder machriya. It's not only that it's going to be the deciding factor, so your pros and cons, and the pros win the cons, you decided, but in the pe'ula shebehoiva chulu, but rather in the act, in the present, zeter nor di maila shebosim. He only visualizes, only sees the advance of the future. This haste, as der hidur from kidu shem shemayim b'shem Yisrael, was vetarus kumen lo asid. That perfection of the sanctity of the name of Hashem and the name of the Yidden, which will come out in the future, Zet Rabbi Akiva ki'ilu v'dos hotzich ongehoiben in der pe'ula shebahoive. He sees it, he visualizes it as if this already started in the present act. In them was Zet ois zu sein achisorin in Kiddush Hashem b'shem Yisrael, and that which appears to be a lacking in Kiddush Hashem b'shem Yisrael, the sanctification of Hashem's name and the name of Yidden. He sees in that no, the Kiddush Shem Shemayim is in that Chilul Shem. And this is their Tam, and this is the reason. Was Davkid the Zweiter Maisom ze gesagt that specifically in the second story they said, Akiva nichamtonu, Akiva nichamtonu. You have comforted us, Akiva. You have comforted us, Akiva. Only in the erste, not in the first one. The chidush in Pirush Inyan, the novelty in explaining the idea of a shul sheyotzim beis kodesh hakadoshim, the das Rebbe Akiva of das sharat hanoim. What was his novelty in his view over the opinion of the other Tanoim? Was his chilu hein boichen? They started crying. Is in zwei Sachen, in two things. Loizu avzu. Not only this, but also this. L'daitom haben sie in dem gesehen an Inyan von Hepech HaToiv, was is Me'orer Libechia. In their view, they saw here a negative, opposite of good, which brought them to tears. Das Rabbi Akiva, view of Rabbi Akiva is as nit nor darf man gucken auf dem Inyan Toiv. Not only should we look on the good matter, Kiddush Shem Shemayim, the Shem Yisrael B'tachlis Hashlemus, the full, complete sanctity of the name of Hashem and the Yidden, was ved der Funa Rishkumen, that is going to result later on, no nochmer, but even more, as der Ilui V'te'eles B'hageula, but that the advantage and the benefit and the redemption is nit ve'azach was werder greich durch a zweiter nit gut zach. It's not as an item which is being achieved through something else which is not good. So something good is coming from a good thing. The dos is ein inyan, but this is the same idea. Tzion sodet choresh. Tzion is plowed like the field. The churban gufa had the mile for harishas asode. That destruction has the advantage that it plows the field. What is hemshech is riut smicha. The follow-up is the sowing and the growing. And this is the Nachamu kefula, and this is the double comfort. Aleph, the Maila v'hidur sheba osid, the advantage and the perfection of the future. And number two, Beis as der ilu v'Nachamu is doing der pe'ula sheba, that advantage and comfort is in the present act, not that this is something for later on, but this is present. And the hechrach of them is, what's the proof of this? The ksiv va'idali edim le'amonim es Uriah hakoyin, Uriah hakoyin es Zechariah ben Yimerechai. Tola kosuv chulu. The posuk allein zogt. The posuk itself says, "Ado seinen nit kin zwei besondere Sachen. These are not two separate items. Nor do seinen eins. It's one. U'kamegeder ha'edus. This is just like the definition defining witnesses. Al pi shnei edim. When you have two witnesses, ver ein mitzias the edus, it becomes one union, one unit of edus. So they become one. The prophecy of Zechariah, Unevuas Uriah seinen ein Edus, they are one testament. Mashenke by the ersten Sipur, wo Rabbi Akiva Mesachik, as opposed to by the first story, where Rabbi Akiva was laughing. So Libatam Mala Ever Ritzoyne Kach, Lo Yisr Ritzoyne Lachskal Bakama. Over there, it says if the people that violate get so, Yisr Ritzoyne is das nor Lishitas Rabbi Akiva. That only is the view of Rabbi Akiva. The andere Tanoim aber seine geblieben bei Zeir Deya. They remained in their view. Ubefrat as in them darf man oplernen und sende Meile und Teuf. Von Einsach, over here you have to learn and see the advantage and the good from one thing. Oiseret Soinoi, von a zweite Sach, Oiveret Soinoi. You have to learn. That's already too much to learn to really impact them. Und auf dem hat sich kein Reihe nicht gebracht vom Posuk, wie in dem zweiten Sipur. He did not bring a proof from a Posuk. Von welchem soll wissen, bin Kolschkein, bin gehe zum ersten Sipur. So from which you would know for sure with regards to the first story. Alpizeh Yudalet, Alpizeh kemen mevar sein dem Tam, was the Gemara is befared the name von Altanoi. Based on this, we can explain the reason why the Gemara details the names of all the Tanoi. Weil durch them is move on der Tam v'sibu from Zeir Chiluk Hadeyes, because that way we understand the reason and the cause of their difference of opinion. Rabbi Gamliel is given Nossi. He was the leader, a prince. A Yisrael, he was an Israelite Neshevet Yehuda. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is given a Kohen. He was a Kohen. Doira Sidi Ezra, the 10th generation of Ezra. Rabbi Yeshua is given a Levi. He's given a Mishader. He was a Levi. He was those who would sing with the Korbanos. Rabbi Akiva is given a Ben Gadim. He was the son of prophets. Simply, who can see and accomplish on the other side, inside the Hepach, and the other side that is the opposite, the bittul from the Mrashaboy, the subjugation of the evil that's on the other side, afilu, then that is betukve, even when it's in this force. On the who's the one that can see the advantage and a benefit in the idea of Inyan the Churban in a oifim from a chama b'kiflayim, in a way of the double comfort? Dafke there was by im alein is those given by oifim kozel. Only somebody who had an experience by themselves in such a way. Al derech with the Gemara zok, similar to what the Gemara said. As Davke Vadiot Manabi given if my Polo said that it was specifically Avadia who prophesied about the downfall of Edom. Well, Avadia get Adoimahoya, because Avadia was a convert from the Edomite. This is what people say, that from the wood of the forest, that's where you'll get the axe to chop the forest. This is the Apollos Edom comes from a convert that comes from Edom, from Avadim. Mashenken Ben Yisrael, as opposed to Ben Yisrael, Saya Kohen, Saya Levi, Saya Yisrael, all the three rabbis were Kohen, Levi, and Yisrael. Kenan dos nidzen atzmei. They can't see it on their own. Ba'emes dos achidush, this is an avut. Well, that is the chilik zwischen Zerishit is ba'alocha. That's similar is also the difference in their views in alocha. What is machriya? What is the deciding factor? The hoive, see that also the present or the future. a pratin mitzvah, whether the detail of the mitzvah, or the hidden close of mitzvah, or the perfection in general mitzvah. Davke Rabbi Akiva, specifically Rabbi Akiva's noisav them was said he's given a ben gedim. In addition to the fact that he was a son of converts, hat euch allein angegeben lernen Torah erst that is given. Ben Arboim, he only started to learn Torah when he turned 40. Is wenn wollte geguckt und sich gerechnet mit Matzovi wie Yone Beheva, had he looked at and he would account, consider his condition and how he is present, he would not reach to the advantage of Rabbi Akiva. Specifically because he saw the result and the advantage that can come. Und das ist bei Maris gekommen, that came out in the future. Und gesehen klar ubevados. He saw it clearly and certainly. With their zen von avonim shocher komayim, he saw that the water can grind down even the stone. Das hat gebracht, that brought him to Rabbi Akiva, saw that trip and that that the avonim can be grinded even by water. That brought as the long learned Torah by Fanamavur, but Rabbi Chaim as he learned Torah in the way as explained by our Rebbe's teachers in Basin Naber. Based on this, we can say, Ados is euch the Haspore in them Yisrin Mailof in them Nachamu Bekiflayim. This also explains in the advantage and the elevation of the double comfort, Nachamu Ami. On comfort by people. What is double? Close agolus v'achurban in an oifen von loko b'kiflai. In the general exile, the churban in which they were smitten double. The loko b'kiflai b'shteiten them. What was the double smitten twice? A double. B'shteiten them was noisef of them etzem achurban v'agolus. That in addition to the actual churban and exile on Hepech Kiddushem Shemayim Shem Yisrael and the opposite of the sanctity of the name of Hashem, name of Israel that takes place, the name of the Yidden that takes place through the churban is Oikto that Chilul Shem Shemayim Shem Yisrael. So there is also the greater desecration of the name of the Shemayim, name of the Yidden, so much more. Even more than the actual churban Golus itself. Okay, now before, similar to what we related in the end of Masechta Makas Anal. These people that are bowing to Avodah Zarah, sitting secure and peaceful, and we and we are sitting with a burnt Beis Hamikdash, and the shul comes out of the Beis Kodesh. Those are the two levels of Loku B'Kiflayim. The Churban plus the Chilul Hashem on top of that. And fitting to that, also the comfort is double. No, Yosef of the Nachamu versus Vertnis Gale, the Te'elas V'Toiva from Etzma Churban Bagolus, in addition on the comfort that we now can see, it's revealed the benefit, the good from the essence of the Churban and the Golus. Bizdos als is given kedai, that this all was all kedai in order, as only Galaver and the Giluyim from the Gula see this to be revealed, the revelation of the future redemption. So it also is revealed the advantage and the greatness in their heisofa lokum keflaim, in the additional makkah. The locker von Churban V'Golus. Und das Guf in an Eif von der Chama B'Kiflayim. Also, this comes in a comfort, double comfort. This haze. Nit nor wird sich onher nasis kedai goydel hayedida v'Hagolus. Not only will you be able to sense that it is worth it, the great descent and the exile. As long as we can come to that addition, to the perfection of the time of Geula, that's not only that, nor menhert, as the Toiva Maila, you sense that the goodness and the advantage in the Reisofa B'churban B'golus Kufa, you sense it in the additional destruction and the additional exile, you sense the advantage of what's going to come. I will thank you, Hashem, for you have been angry with me. So according to this, we can say the hint for the idea of the comfort in our parsha v'razal zogan. When Rashi brings this up, as the sages tell us, and Rashi brings it down, and again to onzok as it relates to the instruction ki soilid bonim u'bnei bonim v'neshantem ba'oretz. Neshantem ba'oretz goyim b'aremez ramez lahem sheyiglu mimeno, that he hinted in the v'neshantem sheyiglu mimeno l'soifches meyes v'nun beis shona, that at the end of 852 years, kiminyan v'neshantem, as the numerical value of the word v'noshantem, 852. But v'hu higdim v'higlom l'soifches meyes v'chamishim. Hashem did not wait the full time, but he actually sent them to Golus after 850. Didn't wait the extra 2 years. The Igdim Beishonim Liveneshantem, and he made 2 years before Neshantem, Kidei Shaloyiskayim Behem Ke'ovid Tevedim, so that he should not fulfill the continuation of the verse, because that you'll be lost. The Pasuk says, Vayishkoit Chul Hashem was diligent to bring it, and that was a tzedakah. Also, Hashem did a favor for us, Shemir Lahaviyah, that he hastened to bring the Golus based on Lifnei Zmana before the time, so that it shouldn't become of a Tevedun if it would have been the Vineshante. To say it's neat, nor the Maile Vutelos from Golus Gufa, not just the advantage and the benefit of the Golf itself. Wir firt ois ados vet bringen, as it concludes. The pasuk says in Boaz Hanon, it'll bring ubikashti mishomas Hashem Elokecha. You'll seek Hashem Elokecha from dir matzos kisidr shano demer mishafta davaya. You'll find Hashem because you'll seek Him and you'll return to Hashem. Nor oich der ilui in kedimas hagolus. You also appreciate the advantage that the golus came earlier, as the kedima is mavatal damav. This bringing it earlier nullifies the Aved. Through our work during the time of Golus, we will merit openly, mamish, to Nachamu, comfort. I will comfort you. With the coming Mashiach Tzidkenu. This is Mesichas Chof Menachamov, Shabbos Parshas Ekev, Shabbos Parshas Re'ei, Tovshin Lamed Aleph.